This is Julie Pearson Little Thunder. Today is May 6th, 2018, and I'm interviewing Marwin Begaye for the Oklahoma Native Artist Project, sponsored by the Oklahoma Oral History Research Project at Oklahoma State University. We're at the School of Visual Arts on the University of Oklahoma campus, where Marwin, you teach painting and printmaking, but you're enjoying a sabbatical this semester. You're an award-winning printmaker, graphic artist, and painter whose images range from disturbing to humorous to tranquilly beautiful. And you've exhibited throughout the U.S. and abroad and are currently on sabbatical. I look forward to hearing more about your research and what you're working on. Thanks for taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you. Thank you for the interview.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
Well, first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Marwin Begaye, and I am Deshchitni. That's my mother's clan, and I'm born for the Sitnagini. And my grandfathers are the Twitsohni, and I'm also the Bethlejin. Those are normally how we introduce ourselves traditionally, so that you can create relations wherever you go. I was born in Ganado, Arizona, and I grew up in a small community south of Gallup, New Mexico, called Jones Ranch. It's about 45 minutes south of Gallup. It sits like in between the Zuni Reservation and Gallup. So,
What did your folks do for a living?
my dad was a maintenance man for the BIA for about 30 years. He was a maintenance man for about 30 years for the BIA, and then plus he was also a jeweler. And my mom, she was a laundry attendant at one of the laundromats in Gallup for some years, and she just sort of bounced around from laundromat, just doing the same sort of thing. And she was also very creative as well.
Any brothers or sisters?
I have 3 brothers and 1 sister, and that's the immediate family, and then it just kind of extends from there through clan wise and through just the relationships that I've kind of come to know through traveling and all of that. And I hold my friends very dearly to my heart, and I call them my brothers and sisters. So
Big family.
Yes.
What was your first encounter with native art, however you might define it?
I don't know. I've always grown up as an artist, and then that's all I've known. Because my grandmother and my aunts and uncles, they were all jewelers and weavers, and we did stuff creatively all the time, and it's really hard to sort of separate myself from what is native art. I know art as I guess I should say I know native art as art. There's no labels to it, and so I guess what I do is native art. So I don't know. I just consider it again as art, just as in the making, rather than sort of kind of classifying it as native art or American Indian art or whatever. So,
what is your first memory of making art?
My first memory of making art, I don't know. That's really a hard thing, because I draw all the time, and just helping out, helping through the process of collecting plants and just drawing stuff out in the sand. And I don't know. It's really hard to sort of pinpoint what was that moment of sort of discovering that I was an artist. Like I said, I was always drawing. I was always used to drawing, and I still draw today. And so, I've always grown up as making, being a maker, being just as a part of that, as sort of eating. It's so natural.
Right. Where did you go to elementary school, and was there any exposure to art there?
I went to a little day school called Jonah Day School. It was within our community in Jones Ranch, and art was, again, it was such a small community that all of my aunts and my uncles and close relatives, they all worked there as sort of teachers and teachers' aides and cooks, and it was very encouraged. It was just that process of making was encouraged at a very young age. And that school is no more. They shut down that school just because of just the lack of funding and just kind of downsizing. But there was another school that was just down the road from us, and they as well encouraged a lot of just art making and just more drawing and painting and being really creative. So it was encouraged by the community as well.
Neat, nurturing environment. So how about middle school and high school? What was your exposure to art there?
Middle school was it was kind of different, because going from a small community going to a larger community, which was in Gallup, New Mexico. That whole mindset was kind of different, and I think.
Was it public school at that point?
It was a public school, and by that point, I really was starting to draw even more. And growing up, I had a speech impediment as well, and drawing really helped me sort of figure out how to communicate visually. If I was really having a hard time communicating, I would draw it, and then just hand the drawings over, and they would get it. And so and high school, I took art classes from a really nice gentleman who was very encouraging to the students, and who really encouraged us to sort of be makers. So and through the arts is where I really felt really comfortable. I realized that that's what I wanted to do. That was where I felt at peace with who I was, and so.
And so the high school art classes, they were focused on drawing and painting a little bit, or?
The high school art classes were focused on just copying pictures and learning what watercolor does, and one of the advantages or disadvantages that I had was a disadvantage at a point where I broke my thumb on my right hand, and I'm a right-hander, and so the advantage was I learned how to draw with my left hand. And then seeing things with my left hand, I learned how to write with my left hand. And looking back at that today, it really helps me out kind of when I'm drawing or when I'm making work now. There's that special gift that happens, if you're a right-hander or left-hander. I'm in the middle, Yeah. And then every once in a while, I'll do something. I'll do a painting with my left hand, just because it feels comfortable and it feels, So, there was that advantage. So he really encouraged that. He was like, well, if you want to continue doing my classes, you're gonna have to figure out some way to keep up with the class. And I was like, I have no idea how to do it. And he was like, well, just use your other hand. You have two. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll try it. And so it really it kind of just triggered something in my brain, that other side.
Yeah.
And so now it's really kind of paid off, and I'm really glad that he has done that.
You hurt your thumb. So when did you sell your first piece of artwork?
When did I sell my first piece of artwork? I have no idea. Probably in middle school. That when I would be waiting for my dad to kind of get off work, or my mom to get off work, or if I wanted my own space, because when I was in middle school, my brothers were in high school, and there was always people over at the house, their friends, and there was always something going on. And drawing for me was to sort of be that space for me where I was keeping calm and things, and just practicing. And I forget who I sold it to, but it was for like a $5 or something like that. And and at that point I was like, oh, I don't care, I can make more, like I can do better than that, but you can have this. So and I still keep that mindset today, where it's like, oh, I can do better than that, like. Yeah, and it's just, and that feeling of giving joy to somebody because they liked it, that always stuck with me.
That's cool. So what happened after high school?
After high school, I took Plan B. I call it Plan B. Plan A was to graduate high school, go straight into college, and start your college career and all of that. I took Plan B was I didn't know what I wanted to do in college. And when high school was over, I wanted to I just worked for a year. And within that year, I started drawing even more serious than when I was in high school, and doing a lot of painting, doing a lot of watercolor, and and just sort of try to keep my hand moving. And one day I was sitting there, and a commercial came on for the Art Institute of Pittsburgh on MTV. And I said, hey, I want to do that. I wrote down a number, I called them, and then that started the whole process. And I didn't figure out how I was going to pay for it, but I wanted to go to art school. And I worked the whole summer for the upcoming fall. And I saved up enough money for a plane ticket and my first month's rent. And I just went. I didn't kind of figure out like the second month's rent, or like how to get from the airport to and to the apartment. I didn't even have an apartment then. It was just like just jump off the cliff, and this was that risk taking. Coming from something that was so, I really had a family that was very supportive and everything, something very secure, and then just kind of taking that leap into the unknown, and it hasn't stopped.
Pittsburgh. I mean,
and in Pittsburgh.
West, but you went from Gallup to Pittsburgh.
And why Pittsburgh? I don't know, and it was just one of those things where it was a new place, a place that I've never been. But I had gone to Pennsylvania because when I was playing baseball at the time, every summer I would go out and play for different teams, get picked up for different teams that I would play for, and one of the teams was in Harrisburg.
Oh, okay.
So so I kind of knew the area, but why Pittsburgh, I have no idea. And so I just took that leap, and kind of just things just kind of fell into place. And when I got off the airplane, one of the counselors from the school, she was from Santa Fe. And so she was like, "Oh, I read that you were here, and I wanted to come meet you. And do you have a place to stay?" I was like, "No."
That was a blessing.
And so things like that just sort of kind of fell into place, and I really don't know how it happened, and well, I kind of do, but it's it was just things like that just kind of. I felt like they were messages to me that I was doing something right, that I was doing something that I should be doing. So I spent 2 years there in school, and I spent 2 extra years there just because I liked the city. It was starting to grow, and it was starting to it was Pittsburgh, and I was starting to know people. And she was the one who sort of hooked me up with a job as well as a busboy in an Italian restaurant there, and and through them and through that family, I got to know quite a few people. Even got to know how to cook Italian food, and just really, because they really took care of me, that family who owned that restaurant, because they knew that I didn't have family. I was from the West, someplace from the West. And they really didn't look at me as for my skin color. They were just worried that I wasn't going to get in trouble, and it was very family oriented kind of a business, and so they took care of me, and I stayed there the whole time. It was awesome. It was really fun.
Awesome. What kind of artistic base did you feel like you got there at the Institute?
My artistic base, everything, the foundation. I felt like I really got my skills kind of. I realized my skills there, and I got to hone them, and I really started to kind of push me, and I really figured out what I wanted to do. And I went there for, I signed up for illustration. I didn't know what illustration was. I just signed up for it, and then my minor was going to be in graphic design. And so I trained both, trained to be a graphic designer, and that was my backup plan. And at the time, we were doing everything still by hand. We were cutting, ruby left. We were doing everything, stripping the plates and all of that. That's what we were learning. I felt like it was more of a trade school rather than, but then you got to draw, and they really challenged you to develop your drawing skills and your painting skills. And the instructors, or the professors who were there, were actually, they were still doing work. They were in the business. And the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, out of all of the art institutes, was the oldest, was the first one. And I think I was the second native to graduate from that school. Yeah, and all of my friends that I met there, they were from Ohio, from Pennsylvania, New York. So I was the only sort of outside the region person, and it was kind of nice.
What a great background to get. So after working there 2 years, then you made another move.
After working there for a couple years, I had to figure out how to had to come back, and I didn't want to put any kind of stress on my mom and my dad, or my dad, and so at the time I was really heavy into activism. I was doing stuff with the American Indian movement and different indigenous groups who were kind of protesting the war, protesting, Leonard Peltier, it just all the injustices,
traveling a little bit,
and still traveling a lot, going to ceremonies, going to different talks, go to different universities, giving talks, singing and kind of performing. And so there was this group who kind of I ran into at one of the events, and they were from Big Mountain in Arizona, and they were going through, they were trying to recover at the time from the land issues that were happening with the Hopi and with the Navajo and being relocated, and and the Navajo elders out there were kind of holding down the fight, and so I decided to organize a food and clothing drive for them. And just not knowing, because I really wanted to get involved, and it was, my people from the Navajo Nation. So I started organizing, and then somehow it just sort of kind of fell in that we needed, we got all the food, we got all the clothes, how are we gonna get it out there? And so we needed a driver, and so I was like, hey, I'll drive. And then later it hit me. I was like, hey, that's my way home, that I can drive this stuff out, and then I can drop it off and I can go home. It's in the Southwest. And so just by a whim, I seen another ad from one of the newspapers or something like that, that there was a school called the Institute of American Indian Arts. I had heard about it when I was in high school. No one really knew anything about it, and so I just applied. I sent in my images, my application. I borrowed some money from one of my roommates for the application fee, and so I just sent it in just on a whim. And just as I was going back to driving the food and clothes, they had called and said, well, you got in, and you start classes in January. And by this time it was in December when I was driving back. And so I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. So anyway, and that, I drove the clothes out. I spent a couple of weeks out in Winslow at a family's house who were taking in all the food and all the clothes who were distributing them to the families out there. And I ended up driving back a 24-foot truck, and it was filled with just clothes and food, and people had donated, and I was only expecting just like a van full, like an Econo van full, and it was really huge, and I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. So anyway, then January came, and that's when I showed up in Santa Fe at the Institute of American Indian Arts. And I had to sort of talk my way in because of the skills that I had already had developed at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. And so they were like, well, there's not much classes that you can take here. You have already graduated with an associate's, and that's what we have. And you're looking at your portfolio, you're very well developed, and we don't know how we can help you. And so I was like, I'll just sign up for painting classes and see, and some art history classes, and just I was just trying to figure out how to stay there and within that community. Only because I had nothing else. Okay.
Yeah, and I was going to say, with illustration and graphic design, it's like very realistic. And so to be able to stay and paint and experiment with some different things. But I can see you having to talk them into that.
Yeah, they were at the time they were TC Cannon was really big, and Fritz Shoulder, and things were just a little bit more looser than what I had trained for. I had trained to be an illustrator. Learn to look at light, learn to look at shadows, learn to learn the different techniques that illustrators use, and so I just started sort of painting, and I had nowhere else to be, so I just spent a lot of time in the studio, and I was just painting, and I was just like trying new things, just drawing and painting, and just really keeping up like a work ethic that I was like, oh, where else do I have to be? There's three score meals a day, and I have a room to sleep in. And I have nowhere else to be, so I just spent a lot of time in the studio. So and I graduated there with my associates in painting.
Cool. And who were some of your painting teachers?
Some of my painting teachers were Mario Martinez. He's a fabulous Yaqui artist who's been in San Francisco, New York, very, very progressive. And then also Dwayne Slick. He is Sac and Fox, or no, Meskwaki, I'm sorry. I could just hear him looking at me. He was from Iowa, and he had his MFA, and he was very conceptual with his teaching, and really kind of questioned you and your ideas. And then there was also Craig Anderson, who also had his MFA, and he really he did the same thing. He really sort of nurtured you as an artist and nurtured your ideas and stuff. So those were my painting teachers.
Did you see T.C. Cannon's work prior to that?
I did. I kind of got to know who he was, and only because there was a lot of people in the studio who were, and throughout the years at IA, who were trying to mimic his style, mimic his compositions and all of that, and I was just glad that I kind of stuck to my guns and just was like, I look at them, I studied them, but use them as sort of inspiration for my own compositions, and but I do love his drawings better than his paintings. I mean, his paintings are absolutely beautiful, but his drawings to me are even more beautiful. It's something that I connect with more than his paintings. So and I still, if you show me a drawing of his, I'll sit there for about an hour just kind of dissecting his drawings, really looking at his mark making ability.
So after you left the Institute, there's sort of looks like about a decade before you start your MFA at OU.
Well, I met my wife at the Institute of American Indian Arts, and we worked in Santa Fe for a little bit, and I was working as a graphic designer slash small-time illustrator, and when I left the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, I like I said earlier, we did everything by hand, and by the time I hit that transition to go into IAIA, I had to teach myself how to do everything on a computer. So everything that we had trained for was done for you with a push of a button. And so, and in order to kind of stay in the game, I had to teach myself, like, I think a PageMaker at the time, and Photoshop was just barely coming out. So I learned those programs on my own, and I would just go to the library or wherever they had it, and just sit there for hours and just sort of kind of play and seeing what things did. And so by the time I got done at the Institute of American Indian Arts, we were working there in Santa Fe, and I had picked up a job at a small printing place called Paper Tiger, and I was the one of the pre-prep technicians, where we would have to go through and identify like fonts and just to get them ready to be printed. So I spent several years there, and I got to know fonts like you wouldn't believe. Like things at that point were really just coming out. There were new fonts being developed every, like 10 new fonts a week were being developed, like, and that was within the Santa Fe region. Different, things were starting to kind of move just a little bit quicker. Photoshop was starting, or the Adobe products were starting to get just a little bit more sophisticated. And we were the ones who were kind of, we worked with Adobe to get things post-scripted. And we were one of the places that we could find their bugs, that why things weren't printing, what things were working, what things weren't. So we really sort of developed that with them. So then that and Illustrator. And so just getting to work with those on a daily basis have really kind of pushed my computer skills and my graphic design skills to a whole different level. To redesigning someone's dissertation in about 2 hours, because they wanted it printed, and they came in with just a file that didn't even work, that wasn't able to print. And so and that's where that practice kind of came from for me. It was, we were redesigning business cards in like 3 minutes, and and just my knowledge of fonts, just looking at a font and knowing what family it came from and who invented it, because they were the inventor was there in Santa Fe. And trying to get files from there to be printed. That was my training ground.
That's a great skill set to have.
So then we moved here to Oklahoma. My wife wanted to sort of finish up her undergrad.
Okay.
And we had decided at that point where that she would go to school first, and then when she got done, I would go to school. And then she would work. So then we just moved to Oklahoma. She's from Oklahoma, and another leap of faith. I just started hustling. I started going to different organizations. Started going to different pre-press people here, because that at the time that's what I knew. And I just started to sort of get clients and get kind of people to work with me, and I just started designing from there.
Freelancing?
That's all I was doing. I was
Okay,
freelancing,
wow.
and I was paying for rent, and I was
Yeah.
paying for, I was doing all these logos, and I was a fresh, a fresh viewpoint at that very moment. And I started getting more and more clients, and more and more of the overflow, like a certain press would, when they can't handle anymore, but they're still taking it in. I was one of the people that they called, and I was that for about 3 presses here in Oklahoma, where I was just designing, catalogs and just different things, posters, and I, and with that money, I paid for rent. I paid, I really helped my wife kind of get through her undergrad, and then when it came time to when she finished up, I came back to school, and by transferring in, I only had like a year left or something like that.
Now, did you, when you came into the program here, did you think you wanted to teach, or were you just kind of open to?
I was just wanting to get my BFA, and that was a big enough goal for me. And so while I was going to school, I still had my clients. I was still designing. I still kept that load. But eventually just because of the knowledge that I had gained through designing, it applied to screen printing. It applied to printmaking.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
And so and at the time when we were back in Santa Fe, is when I first got introduced to printmaking. And it was the College of Santa Fe was hosting some indigenous artists or some Aboriginal artists from Australia. And they were looking for a warm body, as they told me. They were like, we're just looking for Indian artists to kind of sit. You don't have to do any work. Just come to the studio and just pretend. Just be there. And, you don't have to do any work. You just kind of watch people. And so I showed up, and they showed me my workspace. I was just kind of sitting there, and I was like, how does this work? So then eventually I just started kind of making work there. And so that's how I was introduced to printmaking. And so when I came to OU, it was, I was like, I know how to do this. This seems pretty easy. It was monotyping.
Okay, monotypes.
Yeah. And then screen printing I kind of knew through graphic design and through designing T-shirts and all of that. But I kind of fell in love with lithography because it really aided my drawing. It really, like, just drawing on stone, drawing and transferring that drawing. It really kind of came natural to me to understand the process as well. And then the process, I likened it to sort of the aesthetic of through the weaving ethos, because you can't skip. It's a step-by-step process, and that's what I equated it to. And so I was like, oh, I can understand this. So then I just sort of started spending the most of my time in the lithography studio. And at the time, there was very little emphasis on wood blocks or etching. It was very much lithography and screen printing and monotyping here. So, so then I finished up. And then my mentor, Dan Kiotz, had approached me, and he was like, "Have you thought about graduate school?" I was like, "No, what's that?" And he was like, "Oh, you get to study art, and you get to research art, but you don't have all the math, and you don't have all the science and all of that, and you just get to make work." And I was like, "No." And he was like, "Well, you should apply." He said, "But don't apply here. You should go someplace else." And I was like, "Oh, but my family, we just moved here." And I was like, "I'll just try it." And he was like, "Well, you'll have a hard time getting in because we normally don't like to
Undergrads going to
to bring in our undergrads into our graduate program because you've already had us, and there's a lot of technical things that's going to go wrong." I was like, "All right." I said, "Well, I'll just apply anyway." I said, "You don't have to vote for me. You can just kind of step out and just let it happen. I'm not going to be hurt." It's like, I got my BFA. That was my goal. So then it happened, and they let me in, and then I was like, "Oh, I'm doing my master's." So, and my MFA, and part of that reasoning was that I felt like if I didn't continue right then I wouldn't go back because I had family responsibilities and stuff. So.
Now, was your focus during your MFA, was it on printing also?
My MFA, I had switched completely to printmaking.
Okay.
And my undergrad degree is in painting. I switched, which I think is what saved me.
Yeah,
because it's. So then I started the print program here. And I started learning just a little bit more about lithography, doing a lot more research about that, and research about non-toxic screen printing. And we were just switching over from the toxic stuff to the non-toxic. So it just allowed me to kind of work more on my own research on how I could sort of improve the mediums for myself, and at that time I still didn't know that I was going to be teaching. I was just sort of just curious on my own, so I finished the program. My mentor had passed away halfway through, and he lost his battle with cancer. And so I kept getting new mentors and to try to help me kind of get finished up with my program. So I finished up, and then I started to. While he passed away, they gave me all of his classes to teach. It was mid-semester, and that's when I started learning how to teach. That's when I started kind of thinking about teaching just a little bit more, and so that sort of kind of just fell into my lap, and I was like, yeah, I can do it. Not. And so it was a big learning curve, and and that's it. That's how I got into teaching. I graduated here, and I started to teach adjunct here as well, and I started to teach at other universities in Oklahoma City as an adjunct. That was 2006.
Okay.
And I did that for a couple of years, 3 years. I did that. I was teaching here adjunct. I was teaching printmaking, and foundations, and then I would go up to Oklahoma City University and teach up there. And so it's just we call it like I was freeway flying,
Right.
where you would just teach and then go to the next
Right.
place, and then you teach, and then as soon as you got done there, you would pack you would pack your stuff up, and then you'd go to the next place to teach there, and then you would every semester it was the same way. And so how I got hired here was there were a couple of places where there were a couple of positions being open, and I just applied, and they would say thank you but no thank you. This is where that you cannot get a job here. There's no way, because you've graduated here. And I was like, oh, I'm just doing it for practice, and then at the same time I was applying for other places in the nation to see if I could get a job someplace. And then the printmaking one came along, and I just applied. I was just like, I really don't care. I'm gonna land someplace, and I kept expecting them to say thank you, no thank you. And then I made the phone interviews, and I was like, oh my gosh, okay. And then I made the campus interviews, which was, I was like, oh my gosh, this is now they're gonna tell me. They're just wanting to get me experience here. My colleagues want me to get experience, and they're grooming me for another job, just to kind of. And then so then they called, and they offered me the job, and I was like, are you kidding me?
That's incredible.
So.
Well, since then, I was looking at your CV. You've had a lot of exhibitions overseas. What are one or two that stand out in your memory? Have you traveled with some of your work overseas?
I just started traveling even more now. With my exhibitions, and I don't know, they're all pretty memorable. They're all, and they're in different places, and they're
this past semester on sabbatical, have you been traveling with your work?
Yeah. Since January 2018, I've been on sabbatical, and I got to teach a workshop in New Zealand, and I spent the month there.
Printing workshop.
Yeah, and then I came back from that. I don't know. I'm still processing it. Yeah, I mean, for me to take these trips, to travel, to see the new places, I really. I don't know until I start to make work, and I start to kind of think about these experiences and think about the people I've met, and which being on sabbatical really helped out a lot, because I can make work to sort of process it, to help me process the exchanges and just the sharing of cultural information and all of that. So then I came back from that. I spent about a month home. Then I'm just coming off a artist in residency at the IAIA.
I saw that.
And
that must have been interesting to go back.
It was really interesting to go back, and it was really interesting to see the community change. And what I wanted to do there was to just spend as much time in the printmaking studio as I could. So I would spend about 10 to 12 hours a day in the printmaking studio, just making prints, different kind of prints, and really just
how are they different?
Just trying to engage students as well. Just really just going up to them hey, how are you? They're like, sorry, we don't know who you are. And I'm like, well, I'm this. What's your name? Where are you from? What are you doing? What, just really trying to ask questions, and which kind of scared most of them off, because they're not used to someone being that forward. And for me, that's the traveling. That's the global traveling, is really trying to get a lot of information out. As just trying to find as much information as I can, because I was just trying to figure out how to get to know who they are and how to inspire them, where to look and how to do that, because I do that the same with my students here at the University of Oklahoma. Just you got to poke and prod and kind of like try to figure out as much as you can really fast, so that you could help them kind of get to the space that they're wanting to make work about and all of that. So I was doing that, and that was a shock for them, which was kind of nice, and just fun to kind of just do it. And my focus there was to really take advantage more of, to explore more of the digital sort of age, where I wasn't doing the same old thing. Like there's a certain way of wood cutting that I'm known for. There's a certain way of screen printing that I'm known for, and yes, I could have gone in there very easily and just did the same thing and not really improved. I really wanted to take this opportunity to kind of go new places with my work, and go and kind of and one of the things that I had realized is that they had a digital fab lab. And they also had a laser cutter, and so I've always been wanting to sort of kind of figure out how that would work with my wood blocks. So and coming from that digital sort of background, again, it kind of aided me in kind of understanding how I could do this. And so I worked a lot of wood blocks that were laser cut, and I did some paper cutting with the laser cutter, and then I just sort of combined them with my other skills.
So you could get some really fine textured things with that.
Yeah, I was doing the same kind of patterning that I do, the intricate patterning with my wood blocks that I've been doing, and kind of get them even thinner. So there was in my mind that scientific aspect to where I was exploring how shallow I can cut them on the laser printer, how thin I can get the lines, and there was like all this aspect to where I was trying to challenge myself. That I gave myself these certain situations to where I'm like, I can get this to print clean. Like there's no background noise. There's no there's all these things that printers have that kind of bug us.
Right.
And so and how thin of a line can I get it before the line starts breaking under the 2,000 pounds of pressure, and like how well the ink can kind of sit on the surface and without breaking down as well. So there was all these little challenges that were very scientific, that I was investigating as well, and then to kind of explore using different techniques within my process as well, just kind of introducing newer processes through printmaking that I've always thought about, but when you teach, you really don't get enough time to research on your own because you're always in committee meetings and you're always helping somebody else, and or helping other students who are in the studio. So you really don't get a chance to kind of do that on your own. And I had some fellow printmakers who were teaching there at the time, and they were just as curious as I was, and to get sort of creative, curious people together was really fun because then there's this synergy that happens where you're like, I wonder, let's try this, let's try that, and so which kind of breaks into like going a whole new direction, and then trying to figure stuff out to where, like, if that didn't do this, then what if we did this? What if we adjusted here? What if we, no, that didn't work, let's adjust it here. So it was really kind of fun to sort of kind of bounce ideas off of each other. And the students there at the Institute of American Indian Arts got to see that. When they left at the end of the day, I was there. When they came back the next day, I was there. So they really got to see what a professional artist has to do to even kind of slightly make it work, slightly call themselves an artist, right? Because that's what we have to do is we teach, we go home, take care of our family, everyone's nice and taken care of, then we work on our own stuff. So it was really nice to kind of share that energy with them, to kind of get them to see and then once I was there, they got to relax a little bit, and they were starting to ask more questions, and they were like a lot more curious and with their questions, and so we would start to have like really good discussions that I think they walked away with, and I've walked away with it, just kind of thinking on a whole different level, which was nice. So it was a really beautiful exchange. So every day I worked, and I think I walked away with about 30 pieces.
Wow, that's fantastic. So have you arranged a show for them yet?
No,
Okay.
I'm still in my resting stages, and then in a couple of weeks I'm getting ready to go to Crow Shadow in Pendleton, Oregon.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
And I'm going to be making work there as well. And I talked to the master printer. I was like, I hope you guys better get your sleep, because
ready for 24/7.
Because I'm going to go at it, and I'm going to go hard, and just make as much work, again, to make as much work as possible. And to work with an organization like that, to work with a master printer and assistants, so it's going to be quite a different challenge for me, because as a printmaker, as I'm working on these lithographs, yes, I can have these really awesome ideas, but you have to print them.
Right.
And usually by the end of the first run of color, you're like, oh my gosh, I gotta print 3 more of these.
And this is, I can't remember if it's a Northwest Coast tribe or it's just a couple of Native artists that sponsor Crows Institute.
I think they're an organization. They sit on a reservation.
Okay.
And so they're in Pendleton, Oregon, and they do work with several different tribes that are from around there, and the tribal youth as well. They bring in different professional artists to kind of print there, and to use them as a publishing sort of services.
Right.
Just as Tamron.
Yeah.
And so I just cold called them and just said, hey, how can I work this out? You know, because I was wanting to know, just so to see if I could pay for the time to write a grant through the university, to write a grant, or how much work that I needed to sell to be a part of that to get a chance to work there. And they were like, well, we've heard of you, and why don't you give us a couple weeks, and then we'll let us talk it over, send us your portfolio. I sent a portfolio, sent bio, artist statement, and a couple weeks later they called back and they said, we would love to have you. I think we have found some funding for you to kind of bring you out. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's great. So, and it's just, you know, I mean, they could have said no, and
right.
and I could have kind of figured out a way if I would have kind of gotten some numbers to kind of work, because that to me is like the ultimate sort of cushy thing to do, yeah. You know. That nice I don't have to print it. I just have to come up with the idea and let them do the work, and you know, that's you know, again, coming from a printmaker's perspective, that's what you want, you know. Right. I'm like, oh my gosh, because there's and then I've also been on the other end of that, to where I'm publishing for someone, or I'm printing for someone, and that's very hard work, you know. So it's just, you know, I you know, starting off in January, you know, doing all these residencies, I've nothing to complain about with my sabbatical. You know, I get to spend a lot of time with my family. I get to spend a lot of time making work and just kind of remembering sort of that other side before I have to come back. And
right. Well, we're going to get to look at a couple of your bird images here in a minute that are so beautiful. But just to kind of wind it up a little bit, what is your creative process from the time you get an idea? What's your process? Do you sketch things out? Do you keep a notebook of ideas? Or is it more organic than that?
Right now, the creative process is, you know, thinking them up. And you know, coming up with a general idea, and I sketch every day. I sketch 3 times a day, morning, day, and night, and that's in addition to any work that I do during the day.
So you pick a time during, or you just find a time during the day?
Oh yeah. When I'm waiting for people, when I start sketching, and I start sort of kind of working out ideas. But those sketches are more abstract. You know, they're automatistic. They're just kind of natural things, natural shapes that I'm seeing, that I saw, that I'm remembering. I'm doing all of this, and I'm just kind of layering them and kind of working on just formal ideas of you know, making the composition move by varying the sizes of things, and you know, rendering, like using mark making, you know, and how I usually draw is with a felt tip pen, where you can't take the mark back.
And will you switch off hands too?
Yes. I still switch off hands, and sometimes and I have buckets and buckets of these little sketchbooks that are like this.
Okay.
And so
hold it a little higher, Mark. Okay, there we got it. Thank you.
So yeah, and I have buckets and buckets of these. And they're just sketches that that I'm working, and I'll think of like a bird, or I'll think of something that I want to do work about. And I'll, sometimes when I have nothing to do, I'll just go back to those buckets and I'll just pick out, and I'll just start sort of going through and start analyzing them, and start looking at the marks, looking at the composition, looking at the movement, looking at line weights, and just very formal kind of thinking. And a lot of times since it's so automatistic that I'm not over analyzing them while I'm drawing. And a lot of times I'll come back and I'll be like, oh, those marks are brilliant, like, whoa. And especially like some of the ones that I've done several years ago, there's just some beautiful things that are in them that I'd never even noticed while I was doing them. But yeah, I guess that, now that I'm just a little bit more experienced and kind of looking at them, I'm like, wow, those are beautiful. How do I use that? How do I use that aspect into my next composition? And so a lot of my books are marked with like, ads, or like postcards, toilet paper, Post-it notes, and they all have, they're all marked. All of my older ones. And so, and when I come up with a composition, what I think I want to do, be like, oh yeah, I remember that this would work really well. These marks would work really well with that composition. This movement from this one will work as well with that composition.
Cool.
And then they'll just kind of, it'll just blossom. But I try not to take directly from those. I just use them as inspiration of like, oh, this works because of this, so I'm going to use this in this composition. But I allowing myself to sort of work organically and more intuitive.
Well, in your career so far, what has been a low point for you?
What has been a low point?
In this journey you've made from making art at the beginning, was there a low point?
I don't know. I really don't think about it that way. I don't know. I don't know if, there are a lot of low points and there are a lot of high points, and I really don't sort of think of them as kind of low where, things happen. There are a lot of sad moments to where, like, losing my grandmother, not because of work, but just because of age and health and stuff. But the beautiful side of that is that I got to make work about that. I got to make work about the experience with her, and the exchanges that I've had with her, and the the encouragement that I've had from her. There's things like that, but I wouldn't really call them sort of low moments where I'm completely depressed or anything.
You always find the flip. There's the low and the high.
Yeah, you have to kind of maintain a balance. You have to maintain, which I kind of draw from a lot from the cultural kind of teachings, is that there's you can't have too many good things, and you can't have too many bad things. You got to stay balanced. You got to and a part of that is sort of figuring out that balance, and one thing leads to another. So there wasn't a point to where I just completely stopped making work, because of some instance that happened, or a lot of that. I don't know. It's just, this is one of the things I was telling the students at IAIA is like, you have to have an obsession. With that obsession, with that addiction, you have to figure out how to do it. You have to figure out how to make it. And so I don't know if that's a good thing or if it's a bad thing.
Well, I read a little bit about how you got into your bird imagery, and I think I might have you tell that story, and then we'll look at your 3D print.
Okay.
And then we'll wrap that. But yeah.
Okay.
It's been great. Very informational.
Yeah.
So tell us again, yes, how you got interested in doing bird images.
Well, I was diagnosed of having a sugarcane allergy when my son was pretty young. He was about 5 or maybe even 3, and his nose was running all the time, and we were trying to figure it out, and we kept taking him to the doctor, and the doctor was getting ready to prescribe him adult medication for allergy medicines, and a really good friend of ours he's a naturopath, not was, but he is a naturopath. And he was the one who diagnosed us, and he was like, well, this is hereditary. So he was like, I need to check you guys. And my wife was fine, and it came down to me, and I was diagnosed then with her sugarcane allergy. So from there, I just really changed my diet, changed my habits, and so then at the time I had a client who was working with diabetes and stuff, and I kept telling them that their message was sort of passive. Mm-hmm. I said, you guys need to get a little bit more serious than this. Mm-hmm. And they were like, no, it's not the way. And I was like, well, all right. So then I was coming up to my thesis and trying to figure out what I wanted to do for my MFA. And it was just, it just sort of hit me that I should do work about diabetes within Indian country. And so, and how would I do that? How would I sort of strategize in speaking to a global network of people? So I just decided to sort of focus on myself and focus on how I wanted to disperse the message. And so and I started doing a lot of research on Jose Guadalupe Posada, the Mexican printmakers that down in Mexico, and how they were using printmaking as a medium to sort of get the word out about what was happening with them at the time. And then I started looking at the German Expressionism, and they were doing the same thing. Looking at China, they were doing the same thing, using printmaking to help sort of spread the word. And then just through a lot of conversations, I started sort of thinking about the idea of the calaveras, and the idea of how, for one, that was taboo in the Navajo culture to kind of to use that. You're like calling it on yourself. There was a lot of things that I needed to I felt like I needed to get the okay from grandmothers, grandpas, all of that, of like, how do I use this, and how do I ask to use this for the betterment of the people. And so I did, and they were like, well, I think if you're using it to create a message to tell people to eat better, I think it would be okay. But there's a certain there's a certain way of going about that, because otherwise you're calling it on yourself. You're calling death on yourself, and you're asking for it. So.
And I want to just interject. These are images like of skeletons riding
Yes.
horse or things. Yes, that have to do with death, macabre imagery.
Yeah, and that really kind of helped me sort of get into a little bit of dark humor, which kind of Native humor sometimes has, is a lot of dark humor to it. And I was using humor with this series of work to sort of break that barrier down to get my messages across. And so I was using things like I was redesigning, again, coming back to my graphic design background. I was redesigning Coke logos. I was redesigning all these
Little Debbie. Yeah, they're very
logos
effective.
that I was used to seeing. I was interjecting my message into them. And at the same time, there was a whole movement. It was called culture jamming that was happening as well, and they were doing the same thing. So it was kind of beautiful to be just a part of that for a little bit. And so as I was kind of making this body of work, making this series, I started getting more exhibitions. I was getting more speaking engagements, showing more of this work, and I was doing a lot of research about it. And everywhere I went, people were starting to tell me their family stories. They were starting to tell me about their uncle, their mom, and their dad, their brother, their sister, what they had to go through, and it started for me. It started to become heavy, where I was like, oh my gosh, just so that you know, I'm not a doctor. I'm just doing this work just so that it spreads awareness. And so, for a point there, I started to travel with nurses and different doctors, different university doctors and health clinic people, wherever I would go, because people wanted me to start to tell them how to live and what food choices, and I felt like I didn't have that right to do it. I only had an MFA. And so I started sort of organizing their local people within that community to be at these places, and to start checking blood sugar, to checking like all this stuff. Like at these exhibitions is where they would have to get checked for high blood pressure and all of this.
They talk about having an impact.
And so, and it was just me hearing these stories. They were just so heavy and gut wrenching and just so sad. And so I started sort of kind of, I had no way to process that, because I was making work about something that was so heavy, something that was so real within the Native community. Or the indigenous community globally, and so then I just started sort of doing work about birds to kind of keep me balanced. That again, coming back to that balance, to where, and realizing that these, we use the bird feathers for different powers, different different prayers. They held different sorts of medicine for us. And so I just started using like not just the feathers, but the birds themselves. And I was like, what about the bird? Like the being of the birds, not just the feather, the being of the birds. And so and that's how this bird series, or this body of work that I'm doing now, is kind of came to be, is, you know, just is as a counterbalance to all that heavy, those realistic images that are happening within Indian country. And then plus the birds are also realistic as well, because they are a representative of our environments. And really I'm, you know, trying to bring awareness of like some of the extinction, some of the environments that are being disrupted, which kind of lends to migrational disruption, and less things are getting pollinated because we've disrupted that pattern that they have. And you know, there's, you know, I can go into more environmental sort of issues, which they sort of represent as well. But for me, I love birds, and they're such a beautiful sort of creature. No matter what birds they are, you know, and they represent our environment as well. So and that's how I've kind of gotten into doing a lot more birds. And with some of the bird imagery, I'm starting to do 2 foot by 4 foot wood blocks, and a lot of them are. A lot of the birds that I'm doing are water birds, just to sort of
that's why I see a little Oklahoma influence in me.
You know, water birds being that water is sacred,
Right.
and they're sort of the protectors of the water. And you know, if they're not here anymore, then we don't have any water. And you know, if this, you know, there's a lot more environmental issues happening with water, and how clean the waters are with some places that are fracking too much. And again, that disruption, that human disruption to the environment. And the birds are almost the first ones that you notice that that it affects. So so anyway, I started doing these big wood blocks to sort of represent that. And you know, I did a whooping crane because they're on the extinction list, and I have several others that are on the extinction list as well. So it's just kind of there's this underlying message that is not quite so abrasive and in your face as my diabetes series.
Right.
You know, but there's still that importance of that connection, and it also reaffirms my connection to the land, and to, you know, going back to that cultural information.
Well, I love them. They're gorgeous. We're going to pause for a minute, and then we'll just have you say a couple sentences about them and hold them up so we can see them.
Oh, I gotta hold them up?
Yeah. And you were going to tell us about this particular piece. I love the colors.
This piece is a screen print, and it's a blue heron, and it's a sister tail that is getting ready to land. And you know, kind of coming back to what I was saying earlier, I'm using a lot of intricate sort of patterns, and with this one I'm using some of the patterning that I was talking about from my diabetes work as a part of that. And this piece sort of kind of represents the people in Oklahoma, and their connection to it, and that connection being disrupted. And So this is a piece that I've made, and I kind of like the size, or the shape of it. It's really kind of representing sort of that landscape, that wide open landscape that Oklahoma has. And there are stars, star patterns and stuff in here that sort of represent kind of receiving knowledge from the stars.
Mm-hmm.
So this piece I did for a print exchange.
That's really neat. How about this piece?
This piece is a plated woodpecker. It is a woodblock with a little bit of hand coloring. When I go places, when I get invited to different places, I generally like to see what kind of birds that they have, and kind of research them beforehand, and then to go to the places and see if I see them. And this one here, it's called Storm People, and within our culture, the woodpecker is related to the thunder, which is related to the rain. And so this piece has a pattern within a pattern where you get the corner edge of the storm pattern within the Navajo rugs. I've really abstracted them to where it's not the actual pattern. So I'm taking little snippets of that reference, and kind of starting to kind of place them with the birds, so that they have a cultural significance to me, and to the place that I've seen these. And I've seen one of these here in Oklahoma when I was in Tahlequah, and then also I seen it when I was in Evergreen State. At Evergreen State in Olympia, which I was like, I know what I'm gonna do, and then again the reference to the stars. So
Right.
the receiving knowledge from the water, from the storms, and from just learning to respect them.
It's gorgeous. I love that.